Hey everyone, welcome to the comment section on Habs TV. I'm your host Shivani Prasad, and I'm really excited to have you here today for this episode with Amar Khan. Amar Khan. Sorry, I just totally forgot. Which way did you want me to say your name again? I don't want to mess it up. Amar. Amar. Okay. Amar Khan. On the comment section, we debunk, explain, review, and answer questions about comments left by people on your favorite social channels. Are these comments true? Should they have an influence on what you believe? Well, we talk to experts to get you the answers that you need. Thank you so much for joining me today on the comment section.
Thanks for having me.
Sorry, I clicked that incorrectly, but as you can see, we're pretty chill here. Today's topic is that a group in New York region is fighting for a parking lot to not be turned into affordable housing, and we're talking to Amar Khan about it. Last week, Global News reported that, quote, members of an East York community are upset about a new affordable housing development slated to replace a parking lot. They say services a lot of important amenities. So this is the original article that we saw. And there was a tweet about it, tweeted out by this journalist. And did I just click out of it? Yeah. Oh, why is it doing that? Oh, there we go. And so there was a lot of commentary about this. Amar is here to talk to us about it, and he is a journalist based out of Toronto who covers politics, race, sports, and inequality. I'm just going to pop him on the screen. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to kind of be talking about this very important and maybe not so divisive. It seems like the internet is kind of on one side for this topic.
Yeah, but not that community. So we're just going to read through the comments super quick. Actually, here, I'll just pop it up so it takes up the whole screen. So this is the first one. This first person is quoting directly from the article. It says, we're not saying people don't need support and people don't need homes, but to increase the population density with people going through the most troubling and difficult times of their lives with addiction and mental health issues, this may not be the appropriate place. And it has sort of the like palm to the head emoji. And then this interaction here, the person that responded said, maybe we need to be knocking on all doors in our neighborhoods to make sure the households aren't also going through, quote, addiction and mental health issues, and ask them to leave. Hashtag NIMBYism in all of its destructive glory on display. Sad in a city with such a need for housing. And then we'll just go through the second one really quickly as well. 35% of people exiting homelessness are substance abusers. 33% suffer mental illness. That means 23 to 24 residents of this place are addicts with potential mental illness. This will bring drugs, needles, and possible violence to the park and school. This site is 40 feet from Parkside School. The person who responded said, are you saying that they should be provided a safe place to inject so that drugs don't end up in the park? Great idea. Do you support political parties, candidates that fund safe injection sites and addiction support programs? So as you can see, there's obviously a little bit of like two sides there. Oh, I think the server's going a little slow. 1 second. There we go. So let's just talk about it. Or is there anything that you want to comment on off the bat?
I think the fact that this is a conversation that we're having in the midst of a pandemic where we've been told to rely on one another, we've been told to count on our neighbors, to work together. I think the profound irony is not lost on me.
Right. So let's talk about the first comment. The top quote is from the article. So I think the bottom one is making a really good point. I'll just pop it back up on the screen, actually. How do we know right now that the others in the area don't have these, quote, mental health and addiction issues that they speak of? And what do you think of the current residents saying that it isn't an appropriate place?
Well, frankly, Shivani, we really don't know who's suffering from mental health issues at any given time, right? We just went through a pandemic where people lost loved ones, people were inside. Reliance on alcohol is up. I live with a parent who suffers from mental health issues. It doesn't mean that person is necessarily violent. There's different stages of it, and I think brandishing it as one thing is inherently wrong about our society here, and rather quite disturbing. And the response from the residents who live in it, to some degree, these are people who are living in this neighborhood. They call it home, but if I'm part of a neighborhood, I also want it to be, and this is speaking personally for myself, I would want that neighborhood to stand for something, right, and to mean something. I wouldn't want it to be known as the neighborhood that sought to keep a parking lot over human lives there. Because that's really the fight here, is that actual human beings who have pulses, who have feelings, are being discredited, are being demonized and marginalized for their choices, which anyone can fall prey to, anyone can suffer from, and not being given an opportunity to have a better life, right, and work towards a better future. If anything, this should be a moment for this community to want to get involved and invite these people here, and bring in some culture and really work towards helping people. But it seems like these people, maybe either they're at their wits' end, or that they just really like this parking lot, which they seem to say is like a hangout spot, among other things, which is a bit startling. And I've seen some other comments from people who seemingly live in the area, just saying that, hey, we don't hang out here. These are excuses. This is not reality based. So there's one essence of you where you're like, okay, I understand the perspective, but it's wrong. It's as simple as that. Human lives deserve to be treated with more respect, regardless of what they're suffering with.
Right. And in the interaction, the second person that responded to that comment mentions NIMBYism, which is, not in my backyardism. If you, for anyone watching that doesn't know what NIMBYism is, because it very much seems like they are almost like gatekeeping their community, right? They don't want these people in, which is kind of insane to me, because you would think that as a parent, it's so important for especially people who live in an urban city to be exposed to so many different types of people, learn from different people that come from all different backgrounds. I would see it as an opportunity, or even like a teachable moment, that, hey, these people are also in our community. Maybe they don't, make the same amount of money as us. Maybe they don't have the same jobs as us. Maybe they don't have the same backgrounds as us, but we're all part of the community, right? I think that's how you should look at it and grow your community that way. But to me, it really does seem like it's a case of this not in your backyardism. Do you think it's a case of that?
I would say profoundly yes. That's what it appears to be. At least, I'm sure there's some fine people there that would be more than willing, but it seems like there's a pretty strong either minority or majority that feels otherwise. And I go back to my personal experiences. I grew up in Surrey, where for a while there was drug use was pretty rampant in British Columbia. And what we knew of the downtown east side was, if you end up there, someone's going to pull you out of your car. They're going to stab you with a needle. And these are the stories that you hear growing up. And then, as you get older, as I start to work in that area as a journalist, they're honestly regular people. They might go through certain episodes, but for the most part, you're going to have conversations with them, and they're not very different from your average person. And I'm somebody who grew up very close to the poverty line, or below the poverty line, And I can tell you that, many Canadians, as experienced by this pandemic, are one, maybe, two mortgages or two months away from sometimes missing and ending up in the same situation. There's, up to 10,000 people on any given night that can be out on Toronto's streets. So, it's just profoundly, it's disappointing, right? Because, one of the first things that we should be providing, it's a basic need. People shouldn't even have to be worried about housing. It should be a given that every person should have the opportunity to be housed on any given night, especially during something as widespread as as a pandemic.
Right.
There's a lot of layers to this story, and to the response by the neighborhood, the response by these people is just increasingly disappointing.
And that second comment does mention a need for housing. So with regards to Toronto having a need for housing, is that true? To what extent? And what is the housing crisis like right now in Toronto as the home prices continue to rise to pretty unreachable levels?
Yeah, obviously there's there's not just a housing crisis, there's an affordable housing crisis in the city of Toronto. I'm in the process of moving, with my family, and there's competition sought just for having rent. They want 4 or 5 months up front, just to move into a family home. That's insane, frankly, right? And there's a backlog of Torontonians who are looking for affordable housing and are seeking it. Toronto is trying to develop that, but it needs to happen to a greater extent, because it's one of the things that the government, that we as people are responsible for, is making sure that everyone has a bed to sleep in. And we talk about mental health illness, we talk about drug use, crime. Housing first strategies are inherently effective towards reducing the amount of money that you'd have to spend on combating things like homelessness, combating things like drug use. But we don't look at it through that lens. We look at it as like, we're going to be fit with this big tax bill. Our taxes will increase. We'll have to, we'll have these people in our community. But it's no, oftentimes this can be an opportunity for reform. People who are moving into these houses, they're trying to seek a better life, and it's our responsibility as people, as Canadians, to really take care of one another. And that's not happening here. We're seeing a neighborhood, we're seeing a group of citizens fighting back against their own. I don't know. It's just something that it's evident that Toronto is in a housing crisis, and Toronto is especially in an affordable housing crisis. And we need to create spaces where people can go and live comfortably, and to have somebody fighting back against 64 living spaces, which could be a couple, it could be 100 people or so. Denying them that right is frankly, obscene to me.
I wonder why we don't approach it from that other lens, because there are other things. For example, I wrote a piece for TVO on universal contraception in Canada and how it would actually save the government money to provide universal contraception. And it seems like you're saying the same thing with this issue, right? If we actually provided affordable housing, we could circumvent a lot of other costs that happen as a result of people experiencing homelessness. So why don't we approach it from that other angle? That if we look at it as a human right first, that we can sort of avoid all these other issues that people do complain about, and people do want to cry about their taxes and things like that. I don't understand why we don't approach it from the other way.
Oftentimes it can be like mandates of who's in charge at the moment? How seriously do they take, housing? Is it something that's represented in their neighborhood? Is it something that they're, afflicted by?
Right.
And then oftentimes it can just be born out of ignorance that we're not just approaching a housing first strategy. Like I always think of Finland, who adopted that strategy, and they went and put homeless people in permanent homes, and it went from 20,000 homeless people in the 1980s to around about 4,000 right now, which is, if you think about it, quite a significant jump for a country of about 5 to 6 million.
Right.
I was looking at some statistics, and it said, one long-term homeless person saves about 15,000 euros, from 9,600 to about 15,000 euros a year for society. In Toronto, we're just not approaching it with that avenue. We're not looking at it as a full-scale solution. We struggle to house people during winter,
Right.
which is frankly insane to me, because if you've ever been out on a cold Toronto day without a parka, without proper
Exactly.
footwear, it's not comfortable. I've spent winters in Winnipeg, and
That's cool.
yeah, and people, and I did a story, frankly, about homelessness in Winnipeg, and I spent the day outside with an older Indigenous man, and we spent 14 hours outside from the moment he left the shelter to the moment he was allowed back in. And we don't understand what happens in those 14 hours. We think, at night they have somewhere to sleep. But within those 14 hours, especially now with a pandemic, where are people supposed to go? They can't really go into many private businesses because there's, unfortunately, a lot of stereotypes there. Public spaces were closed for a very long time, including the library. There's a lot of challenges, and finding secure housing that's not just, you're here for a month or two, but hey, let's get you in for a year lease, right? Let's get you in for 2 years, 3 years. It makes such a significant impact because it doesn't put that pressure on. It doesn't give you that, that worry in the back of your mind, which I'm moving out right now. We're moving right now, and you have those, like I have those concerns, and I'm in a solid financial position. You will always have those concerns. So, it's just magnified more when unfortunately you're at the bottom of the financial totem pole. We don't look at housing as a solution. We don't look at permanent housing as a solution for homelessness, and we don't invest enough in it. We put a lot of Band-Aid solutions to get there. And, I've experienced that kind of across Canada. Unfortunately, homelessness and poverty is probably, in my opinion, one of the most underreported and misunderstood aspects in Canadian journalism. And there is, to my knowledge, not one person in Canada who actually covers this kind of as a beat. But we will cover the financial sector with, dozens of journalists, but we won't cover the millions or the thousands of Canadians that are on the streets, unfortunately.
Well, and I think it's like really this, we have to shift the lens completely. And it's this idea of just understanding that not everyone comes from like some nuclear family background and then chooses homelessness, right? Like people aren't choosing this. So if we think about it from the aspect of people are put in horrible positions many times out of their control, it's our job as a community to, like, housing is a right. We have to look at it that way, that housing is a right, instead of thinking that if someone is on the street, if someone is experiencing homelessness, it's not my job to help you. It's not my job to make sure that you have housing. It's not my job to give you $2 so you can get a coffee because, you don't have a job and you're lazy or you're whatever. Like, I just resent that attitude so much. And I normally live in the States and I get a lot of that. I normally live in New York, and I just get a lot of that vibe a lot of the time. And I always think, like, why are you thinking about it that way? You have no idea what happened in this person's life. I mean, the amount of people that lost their job and are now experiencing homelessness just as a direct result of this pandemic. And this pandemic is no one's fault. Like, how are we denying people that? So I just really think it's about shifting the perspective completely. I'm going to move on so we can discuss the second comment. This one mentions that it's near to a school. They're really making this their main concern, that it's about safety for children. It's 40 feet away from a school. What do you make of that? And do you think that that's a valid argument?
Listen, I grew up in a school that would go into lockdown every few weeks in a pretty decent neighborhood in Surrey, and we'd go into lockdown about like once a year because there's a crack den nearby. And I think of it in that sense is that things could be hiding in plain sight oftentimes, right? If we're talking about drugs, if we're talking about those kinds of things. I think this is just a prejudiced way to try to look at drug users as being bad and violent people. And I love the response to this comment about creating safe injection sites, because those do work. Those are inherently effective in reducing overdose deaths and drug use in itself. But it's just disappointing that the first thing that we have to look is for reasons not to allow people there. If anything, young people need to be aware of the lives that the realities of the world, right? Not everyone is well off. I understand it's near a school, but maybe this is a greater initiative for that community and for the government and for everyone involved, is that when these people are here, we give them the adequate attention, we provide them with the correct resources to help them, right, to improve their situation, their reliance on drugs and whatnot, right? Everyone needs the resources, and sometimes we all just need greater help. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm inherently disappointed by the constant demonization of people who use drugs. In other circumstances, whether it's Hollywood or celebrities, we're cherishing that, right? The amount of drugs that happen in high society, frankly, is quite stunning to me. If you ever attend one of those parties or are a part of that, it's just demonization of people, instead of trying to find out, hey, these people are going to be living near a school. Okay, so they're going to be in this housing. What other steps can we take to ensure that they're protected, that they're getting better, rather than saying they're a direct harm to our children and to people that we love. It's flipping it on its head, but there needs to be a desire to look at it through that lens.
And also same thing with addiction or drug use. Why are we looking at it that like that person made bad life choices, instead of looking at it like, what happened in your life and what are you experiencing that you thought that this was the only way for you to feel better? Why are we not looking at it like that? Why are we looking at it like, you made a bad decision and I don't want you around my kids and I'm not going to help you get better, and like you're on your own, like what? I do not understand. Like, I really truly do not understand why we don't look at it from the other angle, that like this is in many cases a mental health care issue, lack of resources and lack of accessibility to mental health care. Why don't we look at what happened in these people's lives that might not be even remotely their fault? Like, I just don't understand. It's just something that frustrates me a lot. And we see it a lot in the States. And I think it's something that in Canada, they do a very decent job of sort of covering up. And like you said, it's not reported on. It's not something we talk about. It's something we really sweep under the rug a lot. And I think it's a very solvable problem. And it's a very, I don't even want to know if I want to frame it that way, but it's an issue that we can really alleviate. And we're just not doing it.
Yeah, nobody chooses to be homeless, right? Like, in my instances of reporting, there's very few people that want to be on the streets. I've spent dozens of days, if not hundreds, trying to understand that beat, talking to people who work there, and it's secure housing. It's such an I don't want to say it's an easy solve, but it is something that is demonstratively effective, and we still don't look at it through that lens of it being able to work. And you're right, if it's an eating disorder, if it's like, let's say, gambling, or anything along those kinds of addictions, right, or a mental health problems in your life, for lack of a better word, people are okay. They're going to help you. They're going to help you get through it, right? There's resources available. But when it comes to drugs, it's almost like people take a step back and are like, oh, can we help? Can we make an issue? Oh, you're so downtrodden. You're ruining your own life. Right. When it's not the case, in society. Like, I've fallen prey to, things like an eating disorder, and I know friends that have fallen prey to other addictions, whether it's gambling or something, or alcoholism, right? And financially they lost a lot, but they were still in a good position, right? But that's not the case for everybody. There's like a profound lack of understanding that people go through significant loss, right? Yeah. And sometimes that loss will be financial, or a different part of their lives to put them in the position that they are. I mean, look at how many people are homeless right now because of something that wasn't even expected, right? A pandemic. I mean, unless you're a mental health, or unless you're an infectious disease expert, which you probably saw this coming. But it just hits you in a flash, and then the next thing is you're out of a job.
Right.
I think about my own circumstances in my home. My sister lost her job for a period of time, and she was able to get the CERB, the curb, whatever people call it. But if she didn't have access to that, or if the government didn't make it available in time, and she was living by herself, and she didn't have a savings. She didn't have money saved up to be able to afford rent or the next month. She would be out on her job, and she has a great job, right? She's financially very well now, but it literally takes like a one missed paycheck to be able to put somebody in a very insecure and troubling position. And we don't understand, and we don't look at it through that lens, is that we're all really affected by this. And I understand the concerns about the school, but that should be encouraging people to want to put more resources and improve this.
Yeah, and the second comment there, I'll pop it back up on the screen. It does obviously mention the school. It actually completely addresses the school issue. But I would assume that residents of this neighborhood would probably still argue that they wouldn't want a safe injection site near them, and that their parks are probably pristine, like untouched, pretty perfect parts already. So I wanted to ask you, what do we know about like the politicians in power in that area? Is that something that they would even want to work on? I think in this Global News reporting, in the video, I saw them talking to one of the council members, but and I believe he was in favor of the housing, but of course dealing with this community that was very upset about it. So I'm not 100% sure if that is even something that they would understand or want to work on, like a safe injection site.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope they would want to. The councilors, Bradford, I believe that's his name. It's like it's a tricky one. But safe injection sites are, they're associated with lower overdose mortality. There's studies that I've looked at that show there's 88 fewer deaths per 100,000 people, 67% fewer ambulance calls, and a just decrease in HIV. And this is in Vancouver. In the safe injection facility that they've had since 2003. There's been 3.6 million injections. Nobody's died there. The risk around the area has significantly decreased. But it, I look at the comment from Alejandro Ruiz Vargas at the bottom. This is a bit selfish of people. It's going to be a little inconvenient, but we're going to talk about something that is life versus inconvenience. That really speaks volumes to this, is that we're looking and we're talking about inconvenience rather than people's lives. And, that's the end of the conversation for me, frankly, right? Like those are the two different things. If I have to pay more attention to my kids, that shouldn't be that much of a concern versus ensuring that, people are housed and safe and have a place to sleep at night. That is very, that it's a human right to be able to have housing. And sometimes I think we forget that we have rights to have housing and to be sheltered and to have shelter. And living in cramped, in a shelter, frankly, it's just not suitable during a pandemic or really, at any time. So there needs to be greater understanding that people are needing help, and we as a community, just like we did with the pandemic, right, when things were flipped on its head, we need to be there to support one another. And I'm pretty objective when it comes to journalism and to try to stay that line. But the one thing that's hard to turn its face against and say, hey, we shouldn't support humanity of other people is a very difficult thing for me to understand from a completely objective sense. People matter, and we need to show them the respect that they deserve, just like we would show anyone else.
Right. And I think it's also a matter of realizing from a compassion standpoint, obviously, like you shouldn't see anyone suffering and say, well, that's not really my problem. But at the same time, when you address social inequity for the communities that are most impacted by whatever the case is, a pandemic, the climate crisis, a housing crisis, we all rise. It betters the community in general. So obviously we should want to do something because you should want to do something, but also the implication, the result is that the whole community ameliorates. So I don't really understand the argument that it would hurt the community to help people with housing. I will never understand that. But I mean, you and I are clearly on the same page about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for being here with me today to discuss it. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter, sometimes maybe in Clubhouse. It's at AmmarEscon. I'm usually sharing most of my work there. My writings can be found in Yahoo, the National Observer, Global News, and maybe some other places down the road. But just follow me on Twitter and feel free to engage with me there at any point and ask questions and send your story pitches. But yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me.
But Anwar, I really appreciate it. And I almost just said at Anwar Escon. I almost addressed you as your Twitter handle. This is the world that we live in. I think of people in their names as their Twitter handle. I really appreciate it, and I hope I get to have you on sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this.
No problem. Don't forget, you can always send in any comments that you want to discuss on the show by DMing me on any platform. The comment section is live every Saturday right here on HAPS TV. Thanks for joining us from Mississauga, Ontario. I'm Shivani Prasad. Have a wonderful day.